I just wanted to bring lunch to my wife, the CEO of a major corporation. But the moment I stepped into the lobby, the sign in front of me made me stop cold. Authorized personnel only. I told the security guard I was Mrs. Fletcher's husband. He laughed the kind of laugh that's half doubt, half pity, and said, "Sir, I see her husband every day. There he is, coming out right now." I turned my head. A younger man in a sharp charcoal suit walked out of the elevator with an easy, familiar confidence, as if the place belonged to him. I stood still holding a warm thermos of her favorite soup, my heart clenched tight. I could have yelled, demanded answers, but I just smiled, nodded, and said softly, "I'm just a family friend." Then, as the door closed, I opened my notebook and wrote the first line. Thursday, 1:47 p.m. I just met the man the world calls my wife's husband. If you're still here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts. And if it moves you, give it a like so others can find it too. My name is Marcus Fletcher, and I'm 59 years old. For 32 years, I've lived a steady, principled life on the south side of Chicago. A husband, a senior financial analyst, a man who believes happiness lives in ordinary things, cooking Sunday dinner with my wife, morning coffee with the Tribune, a quiet laugh in a sunlit kitchen. Not my wife. Regina Fletcher is different. She's always reached for the top, for ambition, for the spotlight of the corporate world. I was proud of her, loved the life we built, and believed the distance between us was just the price of success. But that afternoon, when the guard said her husband just left, I realized that sometimes what we call peace is just an illusion held together by blind faith. Still remember the afternoon light cold, golden rays cutting through high glass and glinting off polished marble floors. The Meridian Industries building stood in downtown Chicago, a proud tower of steel and glass, as lofty as the woman I'd called my wife for 32 years, Regina Fletcher. That morning, she left the house in a cream Armani suit, a trace of Chanel No. 5 trailing behind her, and said in a rush, "Marcus, don't wait for lunch. I'll be in board meetings all day." I smiled and said I'd order something later, but I'd already planned the opposite her favorite chicken tortilla soup from the deli on State Street, still warm in a thermos. Just a small gesture, but I believed it would make her happy. I didn't expect that a few hours later, that small gift would become the first piece of evidence in a nightmare. When I walked into the lobby, the security guard, a middle-aged black man named Jerome, looked up from his desk. I'd met him once before at a company holiday party. He recognized me, but his expression shifted when I said I was here to see Regina. "Mr. Fletcher?" he asked, hesitant. "That's right. Just dropping off lunch for my wife." Jerome's face went tight. He glanced toward the elevators, then back at me, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, I see Mrs. Fletcher's husband every day. In fact, here he comes now." I turned. A man I'd later learn was Brandon Pierce, the company's CFO. Around 45, half a head taller than me, walked out of the elevator with an easy, confident smile. He nodded at Jerome like they were old friends. "Afternoon, Jerome," he said, his voice smooth and polished. "Yes, Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Fletcher is waiting for you in the executive conference room." They both chuckled easy, like it happened every day. I stood there, stepping back slightly so no one would notice my shaking hand. I held the thermos with the soup and the napkin Regina had embroidered with her initials, RF. Those tiny details suddenly tasted bitter. I left the building but didn't start the car. I sat there, letting the clock tick minute by minute, and logged everything like an analyst by habit. 1:47 p.m. saw Brandon Pierce. Around 45, half a head taller than me. Guard confirmed. Sees Mrs. Fletcher's husband every day. I wrote with trembling hands. Not out of anger, because I couldn't quite believe it yet. My phone buzzed. A text from Regina. Board meetings running long. Don't wait up. Eat first. Love you. Love you was still there, like always. But today it felt heavy and false. I drove around downtown, trying to calm myself. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. Maybe he's a close business partner, and people joke like that. But deep down, a cold voice asked, how many times has she lied, and you missed it? I pulled over by Lake Michigan, watching the gray water churn against the concrete embankment. They say at 59, men fear two things, sickness and loneliness. I never thought I'd fear the second until that afternoon. Back home, our 3-bedroom house in Hyde Park was as quiet as always, but the quiet was different. Everything was in its place, our wedding photo on the mantel, the ceramic vase she made in that pottery class, the apron I bought for our 30th anniversary. Only now, nothing felt alive. It was like a stage after the curtain falls, and I was standing among dead props. I made black tea, sat at the table, and stared at the empty chair across from me. 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9:30 p.m., the door opened. Regina stepped in, heels tapping softly across the hardwood. Oh, Marcus, I'm exhausted. Meetings non-stop. Did you eat? I nodded, forcing a smile. I did? You? Grabbed something at the office. She smiled, took off her earrings, and poured a glass of red wine like always. I watched every gesture, the way she swirled the glass, the quiet exhale after the first sip. All of it was too familiar, too perfect, as if she'd rehearsed it to keep me from noticing anything else. I stopped by your office today, I said, keeping my voice even. She paused for half a second, then smiled. Really? I didn't see you. The guard must have mixed someone up. Yeah, maybe? I looked into the eyes I'd once believed were the most honest in the world. She still smiled, still bright, still the woman I'd loved for over 3 decades. But for the first time, I saw something missing in that smile. Something not quite true. When she went upstairs to shower, I stayed in the kitchen, watching light pull through the half-finished wine in her glass. I thought about the guard's words, the grin on the man in the charcoal suit, that confident walk. That night, I lay beside Regina, listening to her steady breathing. The familiar perfume filled the air, but to me, it felt foreign. I realized the woman sleeping beside me might no longer be my wife, or maybe she'd never truly been who I thought she was. I opened my phone, turned on notes, and wrote one last line before the dark took me. Day 1 of the truth. The next morning, I called my office and said I'd work from home. My voice was steady, but my hand shook as I poured coffee. The dark brown mug clicked against the table, a dry sound in a kitchen that used to be warm. I took a deep breath and told myself, maybe yesterday was a misunderstanding, but instincts don't lie, and mine were screaming. I stepped into Regina's home office, where she reviewed financial reports at night. The desk gleamed, no stray paper, not a pen out of place. I'm a financial analyst. I know when a space is too neat. Someone's hiding something. In the second drawer, I found a stack of receipts. One stopped my blood cold. Everest Restaurant, the upscale steakhouse where we celebrated our anniversaries. Dated 6 weeks ago. For 2, with a bottle of Chateau Margaux, 2015. I remembered that night. Regina said she had dinner with a female client from Detroit, a promising merger deal. I even wished her good luck closing it. Now, looking at the receipt, I saw 2 entrees, no starters, no dessert, no company notation, nothing coded as client, just 2 people. An intimate dinner. I sat down and called her. Hey, how'd the Detroit deal go? I asked lightly, like it just came to mind. A beat of silence. Then Regina answered, flat and even. Didn't close. They went with a local firm. Oh, that's a shame, I said softly, and hung up. The words floated by like a breath. But they told me everything I'd believed might be a lie. That afternoon, I opened the credit card statement she usually handled. I pay the bills, but I'd never looked closely. Trust can make you blind dot in the long parade of numbers. Patterns didn't match. Lunches in River North, where she said she never went. Multiple gas stops in far-flung suburbs. Restaurant charges for just 2 meals. I noted each line, each date, each figure like solving a math problem whose answer I dreaded. I was about to close the laptop when a soft ping popped up, a calendar alert. A small window flashed. Dinner. Gibson's. 7:30 p.m. B. Pierce. I sat still for a few seconds, reading it again and again. B. Pierce. Now the name rang in my head like metal on stone. I didn't click anything else. I just stared at the line until the screen dimmed. Around 6 p.m., Regina came home early. She changed into a black-fitted dress, the birthday gift from last year she'd once called pretty, but too formal for work. She walked downstairs, window light shimmering across her styled hair. "Marcus," she said softly, "I think we should go out tonight. It's been a while since we did something spontaneous." I looked at her bright smile, shining eyes. If I hadn't seen that calendar alert, I might have believed her. "Great idea," I said. "Where do you want to go?" She pressed her lips, calculating. Maybe that new place on Michigan Avenue. Or, never mind. I just remembered I have a call with our London office at 8 p.m. It might run until 10 o'clock. I'm so absent-minded. She smiled as she spoke, but I saw her hand tighten on her purse strap. "No problem," I answered quietly. "I'll eat at home." She leaned down and kissed my cheek, her perfume familiar and strange. "You're always so easygoing." "I'm lucky." The door clicked shut, her heels fading away. I stayed put, listening to my heartbeat fill the empty space. At 8:45 p.m., I drove out. I had no set destination. My hands simply turned the wheel toward downtown. When I passed Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, I saw them right away. Regina's silver Lexus, tight to the curb beside a familiar black Audi. Both engines were off, but I recognized her silhouette inside the shape of her. Her hair, the hand lifting a wine glass. I didn't go in. I just watched through the glass as she tilted her head and laughed, candlelight flickering in her eyes. That smile used to belong to me. A cold wind swept by, carrying broken yellow leaves. I started the car and turned around. No rage, no shouting, just silence, the heaviest kind there is. And I knew, in that moment, the last thin strand of hope in me snapped. 3 days later, I reorganized the bedroom desk drawer. I do it monthly, tidying bills, papers, little things Regina always leaves lying around. But today, among bank envelopes and an old ballpoint, something made me stop. A small key on a metal fob, etched with Lakeside Towers. I'd never heard of it. The key was icy in my palm, bright like it had been used recently. I sat for a long moment, listening to the clock tick, then searched my phone. Lakeside Towers, an upscale apartment complex about a 30-minute drive from our house, near the lakefront in Lincoln Park. That afternoon, I drove there. The road in was smooth blacktop, flanked by maples shedding leaves. At the gate, a young guard asked who I was visiting. I said I was waiting for a friend, and he waved me through. I parked in guest parking, hands on the wheel, heart racing. Part of me wanted to turn around, go home, pretend I knew nothing. But the part that had endured enough fake smiles whispered, "If you don't open that door, You'll stay blind in your own life. I waited nearly 20 minutes, counting heartbeats, until the familiar black Audi pulled in. Brandon Pierce stepped out in a white dress shirt, carrying a tote and some dry cleaning. He didn't look around, didn't rush, just popped the trunk, grabbed a grocery bag, and headed inside like a man coming home. I watched from a distance as he badged up to the 4th floor. The door shut. I waited 10 more minutes, then went in. The hallway was quiet. New carpet, warm amber lights. I followed the numbers. Number 412, hash 413, then hash 414 dot. My heart hammered as I slid the key into the lock. A small, click-perfect fit. I opened the door and stepped inside. The air held. Regina's familiar perfume, the one she only wears on special occasions. The apartment was bright, tasteful, well-equipped. But what stopped me cold was the cozy feel too intimate. On the coffee table sat a photo. Regina and Brandon on a beach. Her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, both smiling under a sunset. On the sofa, throw pillows in deep blue patterns, exactly her style. On the shelves, books she'd said she wanted to read but had no time. Now they sat neat, pages dog-eared, with little handwritten notes in her script. I walked slowly through each corner, feeling like I was viewing a parallel version of my marriage, only I wasn't in it, not in the bedroom. The closet door hung open, her dresses nestled between his shirts. On the vanity were 2 toothbrushes, 2 glasses, and a jar of La Prairie. What she'd once said was too expensive to buy. Every small detail was a confession dot in the kitchen. A thick folder lay on the granite counter. The cover labeled, Future Plans, RF and BP. I opened it. Inside were suburban home listings, travel brochures for the Amalfi Coast, and a restructuring plan for Meridian Industries. The bolded line in the middle made me freeze. Proposed leadership transition. Brandon Pierce, Chief Executive Officer. Regina Fletcher, President. I flipped more pages. At the bottom was a slim envelope from the law firm. Harrison and Cole, LLP, downtown Chicago. I slid out the sheet. The header read, Consultation Notes, Divorce Strategy. Regina had met them twice in the last 5 months. I read the scribbled bullets. Grounds. Husband emotionally distant. Lacks ambition. Does not support wife's career goals. Collect evidence. Homebody habits. Lifestyle incompatibility. Objective. Divide assets favorably to client. I set the page down and sat quietly at the table. No anger, no tears, just something cold and heavy spreading in my chest. Clarity. In that moment, I knew our marriage had ended long ago. I'd simply arrived at its funeral months after the other 2. I took out my phone and photographed every page, every corner, every piece of proof. Not for revenge, but to remember. I wasn't imagining this. The cracks were real. Then I closed the door and locked it with the very key she'd carelessly left behind. As I stepped out, the late light faded over the lot, glinting off the black Audi's glass. I looked at it for a moment, slipped the key into my pocket, and one line echoed inside me. The truth, once opened, never goes back. I came home just as the clock struck 8 p.m. Chicago air had turned crisp, wood smoke drifting from nearby houses. The living room lights were on, and Regina's laptop sat open on the kitchen counter. The screen still awake. She often worked late, but this time, instead of passing by like always, I stopped. A subject line hit me. Transition timeline, discussion notes RF and BP. I moved the cursor. Heart thudding. Emails between Regina and Brandon. Packed with corporate jargon, cold phrasing. Finalize leadership transition after Q4 audit. Communicate narrative with board and media. Coordinate public perception regarding personal changes. Personal changes. Two tidy words for betrayal. I scrolled. Another email from Harrison and Cole, LLP. Subject: Preparing Marcus for emotional transition. Short and neat. Keep a compassionate tone. Avoid direct blame. Focus on the natural distance narrative. Prepare how to speak with friends. An internal comes prevent him from telling the story first. I sat still. In planning to leave me, Regina had even scripted how to shape the story, as if I were just a variable to be managed. I kept reading. Another email to her sister, Denise. Marcus is getting more distant. He just sticks to his home office. Maybe a midlife crisis. I've tried to be patient. Every line cut deep. The months I stepped back to give her room to push forward, she labeled distance. My patience became apathy. My trust became lack of care. I wasn't only betrayed in the present. My past was stolen too. I leaned back and looked around the familiar kitchen. Every memory felt tinted with lies. She hadn't only cheated. She'd rewritten our story, detail by detail, memory by memory, turning me into a supporting character in my own life. Near 11 p.m., I heard the garage door. Regina came in with a tired smile, perfume trailing, and that assured look still in her eyes. "Still up?" she asked, slipping off her heels. Then she launched into a smooth recap of client hospitality with Brandon to close a contract. I nodded, even and calm. "Sounds like you two work together really well." She gave a small smile, and her eyes lit the shine reserved for someone she admired. "Yeah, Brandon really gets me. With him, the company runs so much smoother." I stayed quiet, pouring water into a glass, the sound stretching the space between strangers. That night, when she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and counted 32 years of marriage. The nights I cooked alone while she stayed late at the office. The business trips I sent her off with, "Take care," and she answered, "Thanks. You're so thoughtful." I'd been proud to be the steady one, the one who understood her. But now, lying next to her, all I felt was cold. She turned over, and her hand brushed my shoulder out of habit. I didn't pull away. I just lay there and let the foreignness spread. One question kept ringing. Who is the woman lying next to me? I had no answer, only that she wasn't the woman I married 32 years ago. The one who hugged me through our first winter when we couldn't even afford a heater. Saturday morning. Early light spilled across the kitchen table. I got up, brewed coffee, and set the future plans folder from the leather case in the center of the table, right next to her cup. I watched it sit there neat and square, a wordless declaration. No drama, no smashing, no shouting. Just the absolute stillness of someone who finally understands. Today, I was no longer the husband in the dark. I was the man about to tear open the curtain she'd woven for years with words, plans, and lies. And when Regina came down the stairs, I was ready. In front of her, on the table, lay the entire story she tried to rewrite. Regina's heels sounded softly on the hardwood. She stopped when she saw the folder in the center of the table straight. No note, no memo. Just silence as thick as a brick wall. Morning light spilled through the window onto her face. And for a fleeting second, I saw something I hadn't seen in 32 years. Real fear. But only for a moment. She drew a deep breath, set her coffee cup down, and said with eerie calm, "How much do you know?" I looked straight into her eyes. "Everything," I answered slowly. "The Lakeside Towers apartment, the fake schedules, the divorce consultations, and the company restructuring plan where you make him CEO and you take president." Regina didn't flinch, didn't justify. She exhaled lightly, as if I'd confirmed what she'd already prepared to hear. "This," she said softly, "only makes things more complicated." I let out a thin laugh. "Complicated?" You call cheating on your husband for 2 years complicated? She pulled out a chair across from me, her gaze steady. Marcus, you have to understand, our marriage has been dead for a long time. You just haven't been willing to see it. Dead since when? I asked. She considered, and said, probably since you settled for your small life. You stopped dreaming, stopped wanting anything beyond peace and quiet. And I need more than that. I braced my hands on the table, my voice low but firm. More than that means betrayal. Regina shook her head, a thread-thin smile. No, Marcus. It means living truthfully. You only see betrayal. I see evolution. I smiled, but not because it was funny. Do you love him? I asked blunt, without circling. She was silent for a few seconds. Her eyes fell to the cup in front of her. Yes, she said. In a way, I never loved you. The answer dropped into the kitchen like a stone into still water. I could hear my heart crack. And your plan? I asked even. She nodded. Next month, I'll file. Once things at the company stabilize, Brandon and I will have a small New Year's ceremony. Nothing flashy, just immediate family on both sides. I looked at her. She said, both sides of the family, as if I'd never belonged to one of them. Regina went on, her voice light but sharp, like a boardroom presentation. Marcus, we both know you deserve someone who understands you better, someone who also likes a quiet life and small routines. I've gone too far from that place. I don't want to ruin both our images with a messy divorce. I just want a clean, civilized ending. I gave a dry laugh. Civilized? You do pick your words. She didn't react, just added, you know, there's no villain here. We're just changing. I stood up. The pain in me wasn't blazing anymore. It was cold, hard, metallic. No villain, Regina? What about the years I cooked alone, believing every late meeting text? The nights I worried you were exhausted while you were in another apartment? That's changed to you? Regina didn't answer. She looked down at her hands, red polish catching the sun. A flicker of fatigue crossed her face. Then she lifted her head. I don't expect you to understand. I just want you not to stand in the way. I studied her for a long moment. The woman in front of me wasn't the one who'd weathered storms with me. Wasn't the one who held my hand at our simple wedding. In her place was someone else sharp, calculating, convinced that every wound can be explained by ideals. I spoke softly, my voice dropping. Regina, actions have consequences. She arched a brow, a thin smile. Is that a threat? I'm reminding you of a simple rule. I picked up the coffee cup, rinsed it, and turned my back on the kitchen. Behind me, I heard a sigh, then the scrape of a chair. She didn't follow Dot as I reached the stairs. The phone rang downstairs. Regina's voice changed, completely relieved, buoyant, even a little giddy. Yeah, it's done. He knows everything. Now it's just a matter of time. Her voice lowered, then a small laugh. No, he won't make a scene. Marcus is always like that, calm to the point of being scary. I stopped on the stair, gripping the railing. That line cut deeper than any blade. Maybe everyone has a limit. But hearing her laugh right after the betrayal, I couldn't tell what hurt more, the lie or the liar's ease. Monday was gray and cold. I put on my old coat and went to the office of attorney Elaine Morrison, a sharp black woman in her early 50s who'd helped us draft our will 12 years ago. The brass nameplate still hung by the door, the same one Regina once called tasteful and trustworthy. Now, I wasn't sure she believed in anything but self-interest. Elaine shook my hand, brows raised with concern. Marcus, it's been a while. I hope this isn't bad news. I set the folder on her desk. I'm afraid it's worse than you think. She turned each page: apartment photos, emails, divorce consultation notes, the company restructuring plan. Her usually calm face tightened. When she finished, she took off her glasses, leaned back and said, "This is a meticulously engineered divorce strategy. And your wife, with all respect, has prepared very thoroughly." I stayed quiet, she went on. Illinois is a no-fault state, meaning the court doesn't need to assign blame to grant a divorce. But she paused, meeting my eyes. Using marital assets to fund an affair will directly affect the property ruling. Adultery isn't prosecuted, but spending on it doesn't get ignored. I nodded and opened my laptop. I've prepared some analysis. I'm a financial analyst, after all. Elaine gave a tired smile. Of course you have. I pulled up the spreadsheet. Regina's income, $220,000 a year. For the past 3 years, spending has exceeded that by about $75,000 a year. Meanwhile, I bring in only $135,000. Contributed $90,000. To the joint account, most of it covering her. Bills. I brought up the statements and pointed to. Recurring monthly charges. Here's the Lakeside Towers rent. Here are Napa Valley travel expenses. Same time she said she was at a women's leadership conference. And here gifts from Tiffany, shipped to Brandon Pierce's address. Elaine leaned in, studying closely, and slowly shook her head. All from the joint account? All of it? Every withdrawal, I said, labeled corporate representation expenses. Turns out I've been subsidizing my own wife's relationship. The air got heavy. Elaine said nothing for a while, tapping her pen lightly on the wood. Then she looked up. Marcus, I know this is personal, but you need to understand beyond the marriage, there's a serious legal issue here. If what you're saying about the company is accurate, Regina shifting operational authority to Brandon without board approval, she could be violating her fiduciary duty. As CEO, she's obligated to report any structural changes or senior appointments. Doing that in secret, especially involving someone she's romantically involved with, is a significant professional ethics breach. I leaned back, feeling both hurt and clear-headed. So what do I do now? Elaine closed the folder, voice decisive. You have to file first. If she files, she controls the narrative, turning you into a middle-aged crisis case unattractive, living off his wife. You need to flip it. Filing first means you set the terms. I looked at her and nodded. And one more thing, she added. Notify Meridian Industries board. Keep it neutral. Don't make it personal. Frame it as a governance issue. That way, she can't pin this on you. I sat still for a few seconds. All my life, I protected Regina. I'd fixed errors in her tax reports, guaranteed loans when her company was in trouble, kept quiet about rumors she was close with a colleague. But this morning, I knew it was time to stop being a shield for someone who used me as the backdrop for her lies. Elaine watched me, a touch of sympathy in her eyes. Do you still love her? I smiled, light as a breeze. I love the woman. I thought she was not the one sitting in her office now. She nodded. Good, because now you need your head more than ever. When I left the office, the pale gray sky had deepened to blue. I stopped at the door, watching foot traffic along LaSalle Street, and realized, once you've seen certain truths, you can't shut your eyes again. I drove straight to Meridian Industries headquarters. Before I went in, I pulled up an old contact, Thomas Breckenridge, chair of the board, whom I'd met at several company events. I took a breath and called. Thomas, this is Marcus Fletcher, I said, slow and clear. I need to speak with you about some internal governance issues at Meridian. On the other end, after a beat of silence, came a low, steady voice. Marcus, I've always appreciated your candor. Go ahead. What's going on? I looked up at the gleaming glass tower where Regina sat in the CEO's chair and said, This concerns the integrity of the person leading the company. 3 days after the call with Thomas Breckenridge, the news spread faster than I expected. Meridian Industries' board of directors convened an emergency meeting. In the notice sent to Regina, there was a line in bold, reviewing transparency in senior leadership restructuring process. I wasn't in that meeting, but what happened inside was relayed to me in many voices: employees, former colleagues, even someone who worked in the office complex. They said the room was suffocatingly silent. Regina was asked to account for the entire delegation of authority over the past 3 years, from letting Brandon run international operations to the plan to appoint him CEO. She presented in her usual calm, confident tone. But this time, the numbers were no longer on her side. The board uncovered a long chain of verbal authorizations, no minutes, no signed confirmations. Several major contracts approved by Brandon exceeded his authority. And worst of all, the personal relationship between the two had never been disclosed, as required by professional ethics rules. When a board member asked, "Miss Fletcher, do you admit that this personal relationship affected your business decisions?" Regina was silent. They said she just sat there, the thin smile fading from her face. The decision came that same afternoon. Brandon Pierce was terminated, effective immediately, for violating professional standards and failing to disclose a conflict of interest. As for Regina, the woman once seen as the symbol of Meridian, she wasn't removed, but her operational authority was suspended. The board appointed a new coup, Dr. Patricia Lawson, to oversee all financial and personnel decisions inside the company. They called it a brand reputation preservation measure. In just 1 week, the image of the strong, accomplished woman I once loved and who once blinded me began to crack in public. The Lakeside Towers apartment was quietly vacated. The belongings moved out at night. Brandon left Chicago for Phoenix to work at a smaller company, earning barely a third of his former salary. I heard the news without joy and without gloating. I felt only emptiness, as if justice had arrived, but too late to mean anything. That evening, Regina came to see me. She stood on the front steps, thinner, tired, her once sharp eyes carrying something between pride and bitterness. "You ruined my career," she said, no preamble. No tears. I sat down and looked at her through the doorway. "No, Regina. I just stopped shielding your choices." She gave a dry, knowing smile, the kind that once made people in the business world nervous. "You always loved to speak in principles. Real life isn't that simple, right?" I said, because I spent 32 years believing I was in a real marriage. Turns out it was just a time-limited investment project. She said nothing. The porch light slanted across a face once familiar, now so foreign I had to look carefully to recognize the woman who used to be my wife. After a few minutes, her tone shifted softer, as if negotiating in a boardroom. "Marcus, we can stop here. I can ensure you keep most of the assets of the house, even your retirement fund. In return, you stay quiet. No need to drag this out." I studied her for a long time. Perhaps deep down, Regina still thought I was the gentle, predictable man who would accept a deal to keep the peace. "You still don't understand," I said quietly. "I don't need peace. I need the truth." Silence settled. Then she nodded, lips pressed tight. "You've changed, Marcus." "I haven't changed," I said. "It's just the first time I'm not letting someone else define my kindness." Regina turned away and stepped slowly down the stairs. When her car pulled off, the shadow trailing behind it cut the driveway like a blade. That night, I sat in my study, opened my laptop, and looked at Elaine's contact name. The cursor blinked over a half-written message. "It's time. File the papers." I hit send. For the first time in months, I felt light. Not because revenge was satisfied, but because I finally stopped living to protect a lie. The next morning, Elaine called back, voice steady and firm. "Marcus, the filing is in. From here on, she can't write the story her way anymore." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Outside the window, December wind rushed through bare branches. Flipping the Morning Tribune on the porch, I stepped out, picked it up, and saw a small headline in the business section. Meridian Industries Board appoints new coup. CEO placed under oversight. I folded the paper. No smile, no anger. Just a calm peace, not from a win, but from finally lifting my head. What do you think? Between calm and numb, where is Marcus standing? Leave your thoughts below. I want to read every single one. 3 months later, the divorce case officially went to court. No more flowery words or practiced glances, just lawyers, numbers, and blunt truths. Regina's team arrived early, an imposing legal squad, matching suits, confident eyes. She avoided looking at me, occasionally whispering to her counsel. Everything I once loved, her smile, her posture. That gaze I used to trust now looked like a role rehearsed to perfection. Elaine leaned in and said quietly, "They'll try to paint you as emotionally distant, detached, disconnected. Don't react. Let the truth speak." And as predicted, they opened with a long narrative. I was cast as the tired, closed-off middle-aged man who no longer cared about his wife's emotional life. They said the marriage broke due to natural drift, not infidelity. Regina sat still, face calm, hands clasped in front of her. When her lawyer said drift, I caught her glance flick toward me, an instant of confidence. As if the board was already set. Then Elaine stood. She opened a thick file, her voice low but clear. "Your Honor, my client needs no defense. He needs the truth." She began, emails between Regina and Brandon. Intimate tone. Talk of our future. Photos of the Lakeside Towers apartment. Evidence of cohabitation. Receipts from restaurants, jewelry stores, hotels, all from the joint account. Credit card statements with Regina's electronic signature. Matching dates and locations of her business trips. Elaine stopped at just the right moments, letting silence say the rest. Opposing counsel's faces changed. The room went still. Only the judge's pen tapped lightly on the desk. After a while, their swagger was gone. "Our side," the lead attorney said, "is willing to discuss an equitable division of assets." I didn't speak, just gave Elaine a small nod. "You don't win this with shouting. You win with evidence and resolve. In mediation, I chose to keep the house, the one I'd lived in for nearly 32 years, where the walls still held laughter from the days before the break. The remaining assets were divided by formula, but the funds Regina had spent on the affair were deducted directly from her share. The court recorded plainly, Miss Regina Fletcher used marital assets for improper personal purposes, adversely affecting the other party's rights. No one said anything more. It ended as quietly as it began, a marriage concluding not in a storm, but in the stark loneliness of two people who once knew each other well. A few days later, Meridian Industries' internal channels leaked the divorce. No confirmation was needed. Regina's image, the once lauded leader, praised for vision and ethical leadership, began to collapse. Employees whispered behind her, and the looks she got walking the halls were no longer respect but pity edged with chill. She sent me one message: "You've won. I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stand upright without shame. On the day the final judgment was issued, Chicago saw an early snow. I left the courthouse in my old coat, hands freezing, heart unexpectedly light. Elaine shook my hand and said softly, "You know, Marcus, not everyone has the courage to step out of their own shadow." I only smiled, not out of pride, but because I finally understood. Some breakups aren't failures. They're the truth returning to its place. A week later, I moved into a small apartment in Bronzeville. It wasn't fancy, but it had a big window over a street lined with brownstones and golden maples. I bought a new skillet, a simple set of dishes, and learned to cook dinner for one not to fill a void, but to learn to live without needing someone else to validate my worth. That first night, I sat by the window watching snow fall over the street, a cup of hot tea in my hands. No phone buzzing, no evenings waiting for a door to open. Just quiet the kind I once feared. Now, a companion. I went to bed early, without overthinking, and dreamed of nothing. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. 6 months passed after the decree. Winter receded slowly, leaving Chicago damp and bare. And I, the man once accustomed to Regina's keyboard at midnight and phone calls, past dark learned to listen to silence. My mornings began with small things: opening the window, drawing in the cold air, brewing coffee slowly, reading a few pages on the balcony. From the little apartment in Bronzeville, I could see the maples budding, a pale green whisper that everything can start again. Even late, I planted a small pot of basil on the sill, just because I love its scent when I cook. Each afternoon, I watered it, wiped the counters, arranged books by the color of their spines. Ordinary tasks made me feel more real than ever. No more striving to be enough for someone else. No more being measured against fantasies in the mind of a person who once called me husband. One Sunday, Sarah Chun, a widow of 4 years from my church, knocked on my door. She invited me to a small reading group she hosted every Thursday evening. "Nothing serious," she said with a gentle smile. "We read, talk, and eat the dumplings I make." I agreed, partly out of courtesy, partly out of curiosity. The first night, they read The Old Man and the Sea. When we reached the passage where the old man wrestles alone with the great fish, Sarah looked at me and said softly, "He didn't lose. He just refused to pretend." I smiled. It had been a long time since I'd heard such a true sentence. After the meeting, she and I would stay to clean up, washing glasses. We talked lightly about small habits, the weather, the smell of fresh roasted coffee. How getting older doesn't mean you're done with new things. Sarah was simple. Gray sweater, an old silver necklace, a steady, warm voice. In her eyes, there was no judgment, only something I thought extinct. Care without conditions. She loved the things I once considered small, slow dinners. A single glass of wine, the quiet satisfaction of folding the morning paper. To her, that was a full life. I remembered Regina calling those things signs of stagnation, lack of ambition. I didn't feel sad anymore. Maybe the difference between us was this: she chased success, and I finally chose truth. Sometimes a few of Regina's old friends texted me, "Marcus, we didn't know about Brandon. We're truly sorry for believing wrong." I answered briefly, "It's all right. We're all blind sometimes." After everything, I realized I'd lived under the weight of demands for years. I tried to become the version someone else wanted and called it love. Now, each morning in my small place, not having to prove my worth to anyone felt like real freedom. I relearned safety in a small kitchen, slicing bread, searing fish, brewing tea. The basil scent filled the room, blending with a crackly radio playing jazz. I didn't need more. One April morning, Sarah and I went to the old neighborhood farmer's market in Hyde Park. She picked the sourdough loaf. I chose cherry tomatoes. At the honey stand, she giggled when a jar nearly slipped from her hands. I laughed with her, a tiny moment, but I knew I was alive. On the way home, Sarah asked, "Do you ever think peace is a kind of luxury?" I nodded. Yes, but it's reserved for those honest first with themselves. That afternoon, I sat by the window and wrote a few lines in a notebook I neglected. I didn't lose a wife. I stepped out of a play. The April sky was a clean blue, clouds drifting like a newly found breath. I set the pen down, took a sip of coffee, and smiled. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in the past. I was coming back to myself. That evening, honey-colored light stretched across the floorboards. I was watering the basil when my phone buzzed. On the screen appeared a name I thought I'd never see again. Regina Fletcher. I stood still for a few seconds, listening to my heartbeat. Reason told me not to answer. There was nothing left to say. But another part, tired yet curious, wanted to tie off the last loose thread between us. Picked up. Her voice was a little shaky. "Marcus, it's me." I didn't respond, just listened to her sigh on the line. She spoke slowly, each word feeling for a path in the dark. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." A sentence so simple it felt strange. No excuses, no tears, just a late confession. She continued, "I'm not calling to defend myself. Honestly, I have nothing left to protect. After Brandon left, we stayed together only 8 weeks. Turns out what we loved wasn't each other, but the thrill of being hidden. The secret made everything feel alive. Once there was nothing to hide, there wasn't a reason to stay." Her voice roughened, like someone who'd lived through a winter without sun. "You know," she said, "when the apartment was empty, I realized what I'd ruined. Not the marriage, but myself." I was quiet for a moment and asked, "Why call me today?" "Because," she hesitated, "I don't want my life to end in silence like this." I needed to say it out loud, even if it changes nothing. A long hush followed. I heard wind on her side. Maybe she was on the porch where we used to drink coffee on Sunday mornings. Then she asked, very softly, if I had told the truth sooner, would anything have been different? I took a breath. "Regina, the problem was never your feelings. It was choosing deceit. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed yourself by choosing to live by pretending." For the first time, Regina didn't react. No defenses, no righteousness. She was simply quiet for a long time, then said softly, "You're right. I turned everything into a story about me. Even when apologizing, I was thinking how it would make me look." Her voice trailed off and fell silent. I heard a long exhale, like fine rain on a tin roof. "I heard you're still in Chicago," she asked at last. "Yeah, I'm still here. Life is simple. Books, coffee, and a few real friends." I told her about Sarah from church, about the reading group, the light conversations without judgment. "She likes honesty," I said. "Not to be right, but to avoid living tired." On the other end, Regina was quiet for a long time. Then she said, genuinely for the first time in years, "I'm happy for you, Marcus. Truly. I wish I knew how to love like that, not to prove anything, just to be." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Thank you for calling, Regina. I hope you find your own peace." "Thank you," she said. "And I'm sorry for making you learn to live again the hardest way." I started to speak, then didn't. A long enough pause for both of us to know the words had run out. I hung up and set the phone on the table. Outside, the sun was setting, bathing old rooftops in soft orange. Spring wind slipped through the cracked window, carrying the scent of basil and distant birdsong. I sat still, watching the sky turn lavender, feeling as if I'd just seen off a figure who occupied half my life. No hate, no love, just a quiet gratitude. The disaster that once shoved me into a pit had become the key that freed me. Because of it, I learned that freedom isn't leaving someone else. It's forgiving yourself for trusting the wrong person. I wrote in my notebook, "Truth is the only steady light in a marriage. When it goes out, love is only a shadow." That night, I didn't close the window. Spring air brushed the curtains and my shoulder, like the greeting of a new life. I lay down, listened to the city shift softly outside, and let the breeze pass through May arrived like a breath. Chicago's sky was unusually clear, and I, at 59, began to understand myself more than ever. For years, I thought loyalty was a debt to be kept to the end. Now I know, loyalty isn't a flaw. It becomes dangerous only when given to the wrong person. I'm no longer ashamed of loving fully, nor do I blame myself for trusting badly. Trusting is never the sin. The sin is insisting on trusting someone who stopped deserving it. I learned how to draw boundaries in love. Loving someone doesn't mean erasing yourself. I used to confuse kindness with self-sacrifice, gentleness with silent endurance. Now I understand. If you keep erasing yourself just to make someone stay, one day there will be no one left to love, because even you will have disappeared. I've also come to see ambition differently. Regina once called me unmotivated, but after everything, I realized ambition without integrity is just a destructive project disguised as success. It devours love, conscience, and truth. I'm grateful that in the end, the only thing I managed to hold on to was my conscience. The very thing I once thought was my weakness turned out to be the strongest pillar I had. I no longer apologize for wanting peace. For years living with Regina, I felt ashamed every time she said, "You're afraid of change." Now I know she was wrong. Peace isn't fear. It's the choice to live, not to run. It isn't avoidance, it's knowing when to stop. Peace is my compass now, pointing me toward what's real. I started sharing those lessons with others. At my church, there's a small group of young couples in their 20s and 30s, just starting out, still clumsy with money and trust. They asked me to teach them how to manage finances. But I told them this instead: money isn't just numbers. It's a story between two people about respect, honesty, and sharing. A marriage can't last if both don't understand the value of what they're spending together. I opened my laptop and showed them how to read bank statements, how to spot red flags of financial imbalance, and how to protect themselves when love gets tangled with control. Some couples stayed after class, telling me about their fights over joint accounts. I only smiled and said, what matters isn't who holds the money, it's whether you're both looking in the same direction. From those evenings, a bigger idea was born. I founded a small nonprofit, the Second Chance Financial Alliance, to help older adults who've been financially abused by their children or spouses. Every month, we provide legal advice, help them set up financial plans, and sometimes just listen. No one deserves to feel worthless because someone stole their money or their trust. Sarah was the first to volunteer to help manage the fund. She said, "You handle the numbers, I'll handle the people." Every Saturday, we cook a big pot of soup for everyone who comes by. She always jokes, "Love is like soup, only tastes right when stirred together." I laugh every time. I doubt she knows it, but that line is warm enough to carry me through an entire winter. In the late afternoons, sunlight filters through the kitchen window. Sarah smiles, her silver hair catching the light as she stirs the steaming pot. I stand beside her, slicing sourdough bread, my heart light as air. I don't need fancy dinners or expensive wine. Just two people, present and honest, that's enough. On a small wooden shelf, I keep a new picture frame. In it, I'm smiling, not the polite smile I used to wear for others, but my own. A smile without fear of judgment. It took me years to find that face again. That night, after Sarah left, I sat alone at my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote, "Freedom sometimes wears the mask of loss. It takes away what you thought you couldn't live without, only to give you back yourself." I closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and stepped out onto the balcony. The May wind was cool, carrying the scent of magnolia from the street below. I leaned on the railing, eyes closed. In that quiet moment, I knew I had truly forgiven not just Regina, but also the man I used to be. the one who endured too much and looked away from the truth. I believe that in the end, not everyone needs to win. Some of us just need enough peace to believe in kindness again. And at 59, I finally found it not in another woman, but in the honesty of my own heart. One late summer morning, I returned to my old house on Drexel Boulevard to hand over Regina's share of the property, as ordered by the court. The familiar road, the tree-lined sidewalks, but this time my steps were steady. The iron gates still creaked the same way. The house, once a home, now stood quiet. Everything had been neatly divided. Half a painting on the wall, a few crystal glasses. The 6-seat table now down to 3. I looked around and felt no pain, only calm. As if the memories had finally been sorted back into their rightful place, Regina arrived on time. No makeup, polite, composed. The performance was over. We didn't talk much. 2 adults signing papers, checking numbers, nodding once. "Be well," she said. "Thank you," I replied. "I wish you the same." No anger, no resentment, just 2 people who finally understood that not every ending is a failure. Sometimes it's simply how fate gives freedom back to those who lost it. On my way home, I stopped by the glass tower of Meridian Industries. Same building, same glow, but I no longer felt like the man standing outside, waiting for his wife in a power suit. I was myself, grounded and free. At the reception desk, I left an envelope addressed to the board of directors. Inside was a single note. "Thank you for choosing to correct things with integrity. Not just for me, but for everyone who still believes truth has a place in this world." Driving back, I passed the red brick church where Regina and I were married 32 years ago. Sunlight poured through the stained glass, scattering colors on the wooden pews. The worn stone floor. I lit a candle not for lost love, but for a life that had run its course. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you for giving me enough pain to grow, enough mistakes to understand my own heart." That evening, I sat in the kitchen with Sarah. The warm light softened her face. I told her the whole story, no hiding, no embellishing, no masking the foolish parts of myself. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she placed her hand on mine and said softly, "I ache for what you endured, but I'm proud of what you chose." We sat there, listening to the rain tapping against the window, and I realized that sometimes life doesn't need a new beginning, just the right ending. Later, I turned on my camera, leaned back in my chair, and spoke not as a confession, but as a message for anyone who's ever lived in that same space between loyalty and betrayal. Looking straight into the lens, I said, if someone out there sees themselves in me, choose truth first. It hurts, but it frees you. No one can live peacefully inside a lie for too long. I turned off the camera and let out a long breath. The night breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. My chest felt light, as if I'd finally set down a stone I'd been carrying for half a lifetime. Out on the balcony, I watched the city lights shimmer. My life, which once felt closed after the storm, was quietly opening again, not with noise or grand gestures, but with the stillness that lets you hear your own heartbeat. Sarah stepped out, holding 2 cups of tea. She smiled and asked, "What are you thinking about?" I smiled back. Sometimes freedom doesn't come when we walk away. It comes when we stop running. She didn't answer. She just rested her head on my shoulder. Below us, the city glowed. Above, the moon peeked through the clouds, and I knew, whatever tomorrow held, I had become the man I once promised myself to be, someone who knows how to love, how to set boundaries, and how to honor the truth. I closed my old notebook and wrote one last line. Every ending is just another way to begin. My story may have come to an end, but maybe somewhere out there, someone is still living through the same doubts I once did, If you've watched this far and see even a small piece of yourself in my story, please remember, truth might hurt, but it never leads you astray. It's the only light that can guide you out of the dark room called blind hope. I don't tell this story for sympathy, but to remind you, it's never too late to start again. And you're never weak for choosing honesty. If this story touched you, leave me a few words in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what kept you here till the end. I truly want to know, because every word you share is proof that none of us are alone on this road to healing. And if you believe someone out there might need this today, share it with them. Hit like, subscribe, and stay with me a little longer, because your presence, even in these quiet minutes, is the greatest gift I could ever receive. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. See you in the next story, where we keep believing in the light, even after walking through the dark.